Welcome, fellow Chimera Sharks. I'm Chimera, coming at you not live, but with another video. This is my first video, so it's not really another, but when you hear the beep, the book will begin. Beep. Lee looked up. The sun was shining through the window. Brilliant beams of light hit his face. A call sounded from outside the door, yelling, "Lee, you better get in here!" Lee scurried up and out of his bed, pushing soft white sheets aside. The springs underneath rang. Lee flinched, remembering he was supposed to be up by now. He heard another voice say, "You're not even up? Seriously, Lee? I just heard your bed move. Dad is going to be mad at you." "Be quiet, Aki," Lee responded. Lee scavenged through his messy room, searching for his equipment. Today was the Soul Eater ceremony, and he would be a part of it. As Lee stepped outside, equipment heavy on his shoulders, he glanced up. The sun had gone black when only an hour ago it blazed down in burning heat. A cold shiver went up Lee's spine. Goosebumps appeared on his arm. Shivering, Lee walked towards the center of town, passing buildings that appeared as desolate dark shadows. Lee's boots sounded a click with every passing step, smacking hard against the silver pavement. Concentrating, Lee looked forward. Just clear enough to make out in the dark stood the hooded figure of Lee's father. As Lee got closer to the setting of the ceremony, the fear grew inside of him. A churning feeling went down from the top of his chest, beating rapidly to his stomach, which now growled with hunger at thoughts of mornings prior. Almost there, Lee's father reached his arm out, grabbing the air that floated in front of Lee, while at the same time shifting his eyebrows into a narrowed, angry expression. "Why are you late? You know you can't be late for this, Lee," said his father. "You've now put the entire town in danger." A low growl sounded from the distance, shaking the ground with its intensity. Lee could feel the roar passing through his body, remembering why no one had ever been late for the ceremony before. The sun again shifted from a pitch black to a luminescent red, casting unhinged shadows in front of Lee. Shadows that seemed lifeless and all too living at the same time. The shadow's fingers creaked forward, reaching out as though they were grasping for a hint of humanity to satisfy the hunger leaking out of them. Lee's gaze moved upwards from the ground where the shadows were. The peaceful chirping of the crickets had stopped, leaving what sounded like a moan, which cried out with a mix of devastation and anger. Up above the trees, the things that caused the shadows came into view. They almost looked like people, but something was off. Although human-like in shape, their eye sockets were empty, and body mutilated into one, only leaving a mouth, which lips quivered with cold, mumbling messages only they could understand. Lee's body froze. Terrified, he stood in place. Lee heard a high-pitched squeal from behind him. One of the younger boys grabbed the blaster out from his equipment, placing his finger on the trigger, firing it towards the forest and the creatures along with it. Lee's father turned to the boy, yelling in the process. But Lee couldn't bring himself to listen to what his father was saying, only getting the feeling that shooting that thing was a very bad idea. The creature's roar shifted into a pained yowl with undertones of human voices from within. Something about the voices sounded familiar, but Lee didn't know why. Scared and confused, Lee ran into the woods. Ahead was a large tree whose roots hung above the ground. It created a kind of dirty shelter which shielded Lee from a part of the commotion. Lee threw his equipment aside and proceeded to crawl, fitting into the small space. He burrowed his tear-fit face into the thick coat cloth of his arm. Lee could feel his heart beating through his head, muffling the sounds of the screams from where his comrades resided. Most of the screams came from the boy who had shot the blaster, but some from others. The heavy sound of clunking footsteps continued to get closer to the screams of the people. Lee looked up from the view of the inside of his arm. What he saw horrified him. The mutilated ghostly bodies that had been layering up from the forest were part of something much greater than Lee could have ever anticipated. Lee, and the whole village for that matter, had been preparing for this ceremony for the majority of their lives, but had never fully grasped onto what was going to happen when the Soul Eater finally arrived. The children of the village old enough to understand directions had been given blasters, guns, weapons, yet they weren't supposed to fire at a giant, unholy creature rampaging towards them? A creature with the souls of humans hanging off of it at almost every point except for its face? A creature whose pointed teeth spiraled around the entirety of its jaw, even going into the back. This ceremony had been going on every 50 years for hundreds of years, yet none of the people knew what they were truly supposed to do. Through all the chaos, one of Lee's only questions was why. Why give children weapons? Why expect people to be okay with what's happening right now? Why not allow us to defend ourselves from this being with the weapons we were given? Just why?
Why all of this? Lee looked up, finally having the courage to look towards his town after cowering underneath of the tree. The Soul Eater had stopped in its tracks, turning its head back into where it had come, sounding a sad roar. The soul sprouted from the Eater at the same time as the roar began to moan even louder. A fog rolled in, making it difficult to see what was happening. All of a sudden, the Soul Eater wasn't Lee's main concern anymore. Through the fog, Lee could see several flashes of red. Lee heard his father's voice yell towards the group, "Fire! Fire now towards the red flashes!" With that command, the loud sound of rapid gunshots began. The lights in the fog began disappearing one after the other. Lee's eyes strained, concentrating on the flashes of the monsters in the fog. A strike of bewilderment went through Lee. Suddenly, a red flash went off in Lee's face, blinding him. Lee's eyes began to water. He stumbled out of the tree, scrambling to find his bag of equipment, and failing. Lee tried to open his view, but everything was blurry. All he could make out was the monster circling him eagerly, waiting for the right moment to devour. Sounds of large paws began stopping rapidly in Lee's direction. Lee began walking backwards, as the flashes kept getting closer to him. But to his dismay, he felt his legs begin to fall backwards, stumbling over his bag of equipment. Lee fell, landing hard on the ground, the monster's airy presence surrounding him. Warmth blazed down on Lee, almost like the feeling of being burned by fire. Lee opened his eyes, screaming at what he saw. The beast's muzzle had opened, reaching towards Lee's face, when something startling happened. A giant gray-blue scaly tail swooped in front of Lee, knocking the red hound away. Breathing heavy, Lee quickly grabbed his bag, running blindly through the forest. He wasn't sure exactly where he was going, but he did know that he needed to get away from those flashes. The crunching noise of Lee's boots changed into the clicking of silver pavement his village was known for, then into the soft brushing sound of carpet. Lee knew he wasn't in the forest anymore, but in the only place where carpet was, the chief of the village's house. No one other than Lee's father had ever been allowed into the area, but no one ever knew why either. Looking around, something drew Lee's eye. Out of all the brilliantly painted tapestries in the old room, one stood out to him. As Lee gazed up and down at it, he recognized the Soul Eater, but instead of being feared, the image depicted people bowing to it. The image didn't inspire fear, but instead it intrigued curiosity. Lee ran his fingers along the edge of the painting, noticing a gap between it and the wall. He pulled on the image, causing a rock vault to be revealed. But the curious thing was that the only thing inside was a piece of paper reading, Soul Eater, being overtaken by the souls of people, consuming the sorrow and anguish within, creature of protection and holy consumption of pain. Beware of the moans of evil and the hellhounds they summon. Puzzle pieces inside of Lee's mind began to fit together, and he knew what he had to do. Lee ran outside, standing in front of the people of his village, still firing their blasters. Lee raised his voice, screaming to reach the people and saying, "Stop! You need to stop! The Soul Eater is here to take your pain. Don't fight it. This is what the ceremony is, a cleansing of the village. Didn't you recognize the screams on the back of our protector? They're from the village. It's their anguish pouring out." Lee turned. He spread his arms out, dropped his equipment, and looked the Soul Eater straight in the face. Peering down at Lee, the Soul Eater wrapped its tail around the people, all standing in the center of town. Behind Lee, it was shielding them from the hunger-filled lust of the hounds. The Soul Eater looked into Lee's eyes, bending down and extending the frills on the side of its head. Looking into the Soul Eater's eyes, all Lee could see now was the love it felt for the people of the town, combined with immense sorrow gained from the pain and evil emotions it had absorbed. The Soul Eater's mouth opened, sending its long red tongue going around the people. Slowly, it raised them up and over Lee, placing them into its mouth, swallowing them whole without harm. Lee gazed into the face of the Soul Eater once again and nodded for it to take him. The Soul Eater wrapped its tongue around Lee's waist, bringing him up. Lee pulled the paper from the vault out of his coat pocket one last time, turning it around and reading the back to assure himself. The back read, "After all is said and done, all consumed will be sent to an otherworldly plane of existence, a place full of unwavering joy, a place where pain and evil intentions are sent away, consumed by the consumer, creating a utopia of the souls. No longer fearing what was happening, Lee focused back into the Soul Eater. Lee could feel the true sorrow emanating off of the lonely existence of this loving protector. The Soul Eater continued to bring Lee up, feeling the sympathy Lee felt for it. The Soul Eater pressed Lee up to its face as a show of affection, almost as though to hug Lee for the slight release of pain given by the knowledge someone felt a trace of sympathy for a devastating creature such as it. Reaching towards Lee, who was squished in between the Soul Eater's tongue, preparing for transportation, the Soul Eater patted Lee on the top of his head with the frills of its face, and then continued to consume Lee, knowing he was going somewhere truly wonderful.
Thank you all so much for listening. I hope that you have enjoyed the Soul Eater's sorrow. Until next time, be sure to click all those buttons. Bye!